In this episode, I'll talk about ways to measure your success even if you don't compete. It's so helpful to measure your progress so you know where you are and what you need to work on. Even more importantly, so you can realize just how far you've come. So here we go, episode 130, Measure Your Progress. Hi, I'm Karen Rohlf, and welcome to Horse Training in Harmony. This podcast is about you making progress with your horse in a way that you both can love. It's about learning how to move and be in harmony. Because yes, you really can develop a horse to be both athletic and happy. When we show up as our best selves for our horses will show up for us. So let's get started. A student had asked me to do a podcast on this subject, and I can't remember if she emailed me or if it was on Facebook or where it was, but there was a request for this topic, and what she said is, I don't compete, but how do I still measure my progress even if I'm not competing, or how do I measure my success? And so I think it is a really good topic because it is so important to measure success. And if you are interested in this, then you might also like episode 103 on this podcast, which is called What Does Success Look Like? I also wanted to say here at the beginning that I love getting requests for podcast topics. So the best way to get them to me in a way that I can find them again later is to send me an email. So Karen@dressagenaturally.net, and just put podcast topic in the subject line, and then it'll make it really easy for me to find it again easily. Okay, so let's get into it. Now, when I think about measuring success, I think about there being internal and external ways of measuring, right? So we can think, did I clearly do the thing, right? Was it a clean round? Was it a clean test? But you can also think about, how did it feel? Or how easy or hard was it to accomplish? What was your horse's mental state? Most people don't realize you get to choose how you measure your success. And it's really helpful and satisfying to measure. You may be pleasantly surprised. And if you're not, you'll still be much clearer about what you need to work on. It's important to have your own ways of measuring success, even if you do compete. I mean, especially in dressage, where it's definitely a little bit subjective. You can get unfortunately, some widely varying results or placings, even if you have a similar ride. You can have a bad show and then 3 months later have a great show, but you still placed higher in the show that you would have said was the bad one than you did in the one where your horse is giving it his all. So there's so many factors in competing when you start thinking about placings or scores. Even the same judge is going to be slightly different. I mean, it's sad to say that, but it's true. So you want to make sure you're starting out by measuring things that are more objective, right? So you can definitely do a test and say, I didn't make any mistakes, right? My changes were clean. Things happened at the letter. My horse never broke gait at the times. He didn't hop into the canter in his lengthening. So things that are actually indisputable. You want to start by measuring things like that. I mean, I did a lot of competing back in the day. And if I measured my training success or my confidence based on scores, that could be really confusing, right? And I got plenty of good scores, but even the good ones, it's like sometimes you'll get good scores, and on the inside, or in the relationship between you and your horse, it wasn't that great. So I love the idea of setting your own ways to measure. With that said, putting a competition on the calendar is kind of a great way to remember to do something like that. So that's the really cool thing about competing, is you have to plan ahead. You got to put it on the calendar, and then there on that day, something's going to happen in a regulation size space, and you're going to do this thing that's set out in front of you, and you're going to get some results. And you'll be able to, in your mind, you are going to be comparing it to everybody else around you and things that you did before. So I think the competition creates this great way to measure, but we have to look in it and go, well, what is it about the competition that's making me measure stuff? Is it that I'm doing a test at a certain time that I set for myself? Is it that people are watching? Is it the judges? Is it the scores? Is it the placings? Like, what part of that do you want to measure? Because some of those things are actually recreatable without the competition. Like, just the power of putting a date on the calendar as if it's a show, as if it's a competition, and go, okay, I'm going to look ahead on my calendar 3 weeks from now on Friday at 2:00. I'm going to run through this dressage pattern, or I'm going to run through whatever it is you're working on. I'm going to do the thing. You don't even have to be practicing dressage tests, right? So this is the part where you get to choose what you want to measure. So you could say, my thing that I want to measure is I'm going to do a solo trail ride, right? So that's the thing that I want to measure my progress. How is my horse? Can I do a solo trail ride and have it work out well? For whatever, you get to define what well means, right? And that's where I said before, it's like, what's the thing you're going to do? And what's your measure of success? It's like, whoa, I didn't get bucked off. Wow, I'm a rock star, right? That could be it. It could be that you do the solo trail ride and your horse doesn't jig all the way home. You could do a solo trail ride and your horse feels like more forward and motivated, or doesn't have separation anxiety, or. I think the point is to sit yourself down and go, what is the thing that I'm trying to accomplish, and what is success going to look like, right? So if you know what it is you're trying to measure, and the thing is that you want to do, then you can also then better break that down into other chunks, right? So we can say, in dressage, we have levels. We have, training level, first level, second level, third level, fourth level, and then Prix-St. George, Intermediaire 1 and 2, and then Grand Prix. So you might have the goal of, I want to be a Grand Prix rider, but guess what? You're probably going to start at some lower level, right? We don't just jump in and do that. Most people aren't just jumping in and doing Grand Prix as their first ride or their first competition. So even if your goal that you want to measure is your ability to go on a solo trail ride in a calm way, and list your criteria of what you're going to be measuring, it might start with riding around the property without your horse calling to another horse, or it could be going on a trail ride with your horse's favorite security blanket buddy, right? And you can set all these other things and find the easiest place to have success as defined by you. Find the easiest version to do that, and do that and measure that until you go, this is in the bag. Every time I go out with this other person on this particular trail, it's no problem. It was a little sketchy at first. Now it's no problem. And it's consistently no problem. And I know how to set myself up so that I can make sure it's not going to be a problem to the best of my ability. Great. Check that off. You've measured it. Now, what's the next step? It's like, okay, I can do it there, but can I do this other trail? Same buddy, or use the same trail and a different buddy, whatever it is. So when we start measuring, it often causes us to think a little more clearly and think in more tangible, literally measurable ways, right? So something you can write down. And then, like I mentioned before, you can also think about how did it feel, right? So did it feel energized? Did it feel calm? Did you feel, do you want to feel not anxious? Do you want to feel like you can think during it? Do you want to feel exuberance? Do you want to feel excited and adrenaline rush? Like, what do you want to feel? And you get to choose. What's your definition of success for your horse and your whatever it is, the thing that you want to do? And the how easy or hard it is, I think it's important to not discount success, even if it was like, whoo, had to really focus on that one, right? Because it's a stage that you go through, right? It's like, okay, I got it done, but man, I couldn't relax for a second. I had to really stay on it. I had to really stay focused. I couldn't get fuzzy brain for a split second. And then, but there was other days you're like, oh my gosh, I totally spaced out and my horse saved me. I mean, I've had that happen. I've been in the middle of a dressage test, and I'm like halfway across the diagonal doing my 2 tempies, and I'm like, I wasn't counting. Right? I totally spaced out. And then I go back and I get the test and later look at the video. I'm like, oh, cool, did the right number. Right? So that was like, oh my gosh, my tempies were so easy that I could space out in the middle of them and still nail it. And there's other times when it's going to be hard, but you might just get it done anyway. Now, when we say easy, hard, nobody complains about easy, but if I say hard, then there's some people whose brain is going to go, oh, you shouldn't be hard on your horse. Like they're picturing it was hard, meaning I had to really wrestle with my horse and dig my spurs in and pull in his mouth. No, sometimes you can have a lot of harmony and have a really good result, but you just know how much focus, how much concentration, how you had to be right there, and you had to really, keep the other options kind of closed off or whatever it is. But your horse might not think that was hard. You know it was hard because you had to be 10 times better than your best, but you got it done. So the kind of hard, the kind of difficulty we don't want to have is it ain't working and we're trying to scrape it together and pretend that it's working when it's really clear it's not working, right? So in jumping, that becomes really clear. It's the horse that's refusing or crashing through every single fence. It's okay, that's too hard. It's so hard that it's not really happening, right? And so that would be, your horse refuses, then crashes through it, refuses and crashes through it. Chances are that rider's going to go, excusing myself, right? This is too hard right now. For whatever reason, I don't know, but it's too hard. In dressage, often, unfortunately, because we don't have any fences to crash through, sometimes we're having a ride that's or not us, not we, some people. There is a possibility of a circumstance where things are going the equivalent of crashing through fences, but because there's no fences to crash through, everybody just keeps going. So that would be the kind of quote unquote hard or difficulty or challenge that I'd say that's not more. It's pull the plug. What are you doing? Don't keep measuring that. We already know it's not working. Another thing you can measure is, you and your horse's mental state during the thing. So it's kind of connected to maybe the easy or hard, or, the criteria you put in there. You could say, I want to be able to ride my first level test and be so confident that I'm not worried about going off course. I want that feeling that I totally know where I'm going, and I'm barely having to think about that because I'm practiced so much. I've memorized the test. I know it inside out. And so I barely even have to think about it. Like, that's a mental state. Like, I want to have a goal that I feel confident about where I'm going through the whole pattern. Like, that's something you can measure, because you can write down that question and remember to ask yourself afterwards, how was that? Right? And you can report back, so I could, go through a test and think, yeah, totally, no problem. It was just after the free walk. I always have to remind myself, when the trot transition comes up, or which letter to go to at the free walk, or something like that. But I remembered it, So you could report back. You can define. Did you get lost once, twice, 3 times? How quickly were you able to then review and remember where you went? And the same for your horse. Like, how was your horse's attentiveness during your ride? Was he on you? Was he in the external? Was he looking really around the environment, but still able to pay attention to you? Because that's possible too. So thinking about, all those different aspects of mental state, calmness, but that, we don't, I talk a lot about relaxation, but it's not the only emotion. So we can be in a calm, happy state, but also be like, rah! Like, maybe you want your horse to feel like he's like, you let me at it, depending on what you're doing, right? I want him to attack those jumps. I want him to take me to those jumps. Or I want my horse to really wait and be patient, calm, whatever it is. I feel like a little bit like I'm repeating myself, but like, you get to choose. It's all right. So one thing, when I'm helping people with finding the sweet spot, I'll set them up with asking them to find their adjectives, right? So before you go out with your horse, what adjectives do you want to feel, right? So dressage is just so much less clear than jumping. We know I cleared it, I didn't clear it. So when we get into more touchy-feely sort of things, you can think about what adjectives do you want to use to describe how your horse moves. Do you want it to feel more springy or less springy? You want it to feel smoother or more dramatic in cadence? Do you want your horse to be, more brilliant or less brilliant, more calm and methodical? What are the adjectives that you would like to feel? More of what? And you can even think less of what, but I like to put things in the positive. So have those adjectives floating around in your mind. It's a less objective thing. Although if you tell somebody around you, like, hey, I'm looking for my horse to feel more cadence and springy, then I'll bet you they'll agree with you. If you go, oh, my horse felt more springy just then, and they'd be like, yeah, it looked more springy too. So some things that seem like maybe they're not so tangible actually can be if you have them in the front of your mind. Now, other ways to measure at home without a competition are to just create patterns, right? I said before, you can ride the pattern without it being in the competition, but you don't even have to ride the whole test. Like, you can ride just a short pattern, but you have to be really clear. So often after I warm up, I'll stop and then I'll think, okay, what am I going to do? And if it's a real gymnastic focus, then I'll probably stop and I'll go, okay, I'm going to go down the long side. At E, I'm going to, at the first letter, I'm going to do an 8-meter circle. And then 2 letters later, I'm going to do an 8-meter like demi-volte with the slight haunches in position, work on more collectability. And then I'm going to half pass back to the wall. And then I'm going to do transition over here. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter what it is. It could just be down the long side, 20-meter circle, transition to the stretchy circle on the short side, back up to working, and then I'm going to go, walk at H. You can make stuff up. So we actually have a whole course called Prepare for Perform Perfect, and in that we it's to help people prepare for competition, but we talk about this a lot in it of like you can make your own patterns. In the upward spiral course, I tempt people to take 3 different movements or exercises and kind of mix and match, like take flashcards and put them in a different order and go, okay, I'm going to walk, and then I'm going to circle, and then I'm going to stretch. Okay, and then I'm going to try it again. I'm going to stretch, and then I'm going to circle, and then I'm going to walk. So you get to make it up. But the important part is to be precise, right? It's an 8-meter circle at that letter. Or if you don't have letters, it's okay. It's an 8-meter circle at that tree. Or if you don't know what 8 meters is, it's like, I'm going to make a circle starting at that tree and going just outside that pile of poop, right? So, and then, hopefully the tree and the pile of poop isn't moving. You can go, okay, now I'm going to do it in the other direction. And then watch where your feet go. Can you get the same size circle in both directions? Or when you turn at the tree going track right, does he turn immediately? But when you're going track left, it takes like 3 more strides before he actually turns. So don't let a lack of an arena with mirrors and letters and regulation sizing stop you from creating patterns. So I regularly ride in the field, and I use trees, and I use piles of poop, and I use whatever lines from the mower. So on that day, maybe you don't know how many meters it was, but if it's a immovable object, then you can practice it more than once, and you can practice it the same thing in different directions, right? And you can measure, like, I keep cutting into the pile of poop when I'm in to go out. I can't believe I'm mentioning piles of poop on my podcast. Anyway, we're horse people. It's okay, right? Anyway, so don't let a lack of a dressage arena limit yourself. And if it's something that you do want to measure, then it just takes a little bit of advanced planning. Go get a tape measure, walk out to the field, measure the distance from the tree, and put something down on the ground, or put some spray paint, or whatever it is that you can mark something. And then okay, that's what a 10-meter circle is like. So find patterns, make them up, or find them in the tests. Videoing yourself can be another great way to measure progress, right? Commit to videoing yourself at least, you can do it however often you want, but if you do it on a regular basis, that can be super fun. Even if it's just once a month. Once a month after 3 months, hopefully you're going to see a difference. Or just set that video camera up and just take little clips. I have so many students in the courses who do lots of videoing, and they'll send me short clips, and it's so helpful. You can really see the progress, and often it's normal human nature that when you look at your own video, you're going to see all the stuff that's not working. Oh, still doing that. Oh, my left arm is still doing this. That's normal. It's okay. Use it to do something positive. But then what'll happen is I'll say, after 6 months or so, I'll be like, you should go back and look at that first video again. And often they're like, oh my gosh, I hadn't noticed everything that changed in a positive way. So busy focusing on everything that still needs to change. But go back and make yourself look for what did improve. Friends are another great way to measure your progress. Right? Have a trusted friend whose opinion you like. If they haven't seen you ride in a while, maybe they haven't seen you in 3 months, ride with them again. I'll bet you they'll be able to see all the progress that you've made. And, you can either just get the general impression, like, oh my God, her neck is so much more muscly, or whatever it is. Or, oh my God, her strides are so much more fluid. They'll give you the snapshot of the difference. But you can also set them up and go, hey, I've been really working on, whatever, fill in the blank. Can you, come watch me ride? Or just stand there. Can you watch me ride while I do this pattern and practice this test? And then have them come back later. So friends work for accountability, if nothing else. It's like, hey, let's meet once a month or every 2 weeks and ride together and practice our fill in the blanks. It's so helpful if you have a good one, right? Not one that's going to start teaching if you don't want to be taught or trying to show off with everything they know, but just go, hey, here's what I've been playing with. And that they'll, when you ask them for their opinion or to watch you, they will. So you can work that out. I actually have a video in the classroom about the art of riding with a friend. Another way to measure your progress without necessarily competing is through clinics, especially if it's a clinic with the same clinician. So if the same clinician comes to your area and you've already vetted them and they're somebody that you trust and you value their opinion, and depending on their teaching style, but that could be another accountability piece. It's a date on the calendar, and if they remember you, and then they can notice, and you're also clear about what you would like to show them, or if they're open to that. But that can be a really nice way to measure your progress, get a valued and trusted opinion, just like you would from a judge, but it's a little more flexible and a little less performance-y, and you get a chance to improve things in the moment, hopefully. So one of the themes here with whatever method that you choose to measure your progress, it's going to involve taking stock. It's going to involve making a conscious effort to decide that you would like to be more aware of the progress you're making. Some people can just sort of hold that in their head, and some people need to write it down. I think there's a lot of power in writing it down, and it does take practice. I find when I would start journaling, I'd write down lots of stuff, and a lot of it ended up not really being that important, sort of necessary to do at the time, or I wanted to write it at the time. But as you practice it, you're going to start realizing what sorts of things you need to write down. And of course, I have the Happy Athlete Progress Journal you can find in the Dressage Naturally web shop if you want a little guidance to learn what sort of questions to ask yourself. But you can do it on a piece of paper too, for this purpose of measuring your success, of just write it down. Go, what is the success that you want to measure? What is going to help you know that you did progress? And get really, really specific about it, right? So what's the thing? What's the internal and external parts of it, right? What is the thing that you want to measure? What's the internal factor? How, make sure you take stock of how you want it to feel. And the external, what exactly? How large is that circle? What are the patterns you're doing? Exactly what are the criteria that you're measuring? All right, well, I hope that helps. And once again, as always, I'd love ideas for podcasts. And every now and then you'll see me share a link where you can record a question that you'd like me to answer on the podcast. So keep your eyes out. I sort of do that randomly, usually on Facebook, sometimes in my email. So yeah, keep the ideas coming. Always happy to help.